Recording. Recording. Hi, Amena, take it away.
Okay, somebody responded and told me the number of people in the audience.
Yeah, it's 9 people, Amena.
It's 9 people. Okay, so I can't see everyone. That's fine. That's fine. Just so I wanted to see, like, make sure I saw my audience. Okay, my name is Amena Chaudhary. I am a DEI strategist and an inclusion and emotional resilience coach. I've been doing this kind of work for about oh gosh, I want to say like a little close to 2 decades now. I'm a nonviolent communication practitioner. I've done work in restorative justice. My professional background, although the other work is not like the other work is not professional, but like my corporate background is in learning and development, and DEI work in multiple different sectors. One of the things I do now is administer the IDI assessment, and as Jess mentioned, after you take the assessment, which takes 15 to 20 minutes to do, what you get is a group presentation where you get to see where your group averages out in terms of like the results. But to get your individual results, the assessment does require you to have a one-on-one debrief or consultation with a qualified administrator. I'm a qualified administrator, and so you'll get to do that with me. And we'll give you instructions on how to schedule your debrief sessions near the end of today's presentation. Is that good enough for an introduction?
Yeah, it's super. Does anybody have any questions or anything for Amena before we talk a little bit about the assessment tool and kind of explain the history of it and what it's happening, what's going on? Jada.
Sorry, I just want to understand correctly. So in order to get the individual results, we would need to schedule a one-on-one debrief. Okay.
Yes, and we'll give you instructions on how to do that and make them as simple and easy and painless to schedule. Yes, absolutely. So you'll get to be on a call with me.
Cool. Other questions or comments for Amena? I can only see 4 of you, so the 4 of you are representing everyone else in the room.
Seems like no one has any other questions.
I can't.
Yeah,
No, the answer is no. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay. So Amena is amazing. We've met through yet another DEI person that we can collaborate with, etc. And so after Tuesday's training, I immediately sent an email and was like, "Oh, Amena, will you please help me with this thing if we end up doing the assessment tool?" And we're going to do the assessment tool. So she said yes, thank goodness. So the way that the tool is set up is you have to be a certified qualified administrator in order to give this tool to groups of people. So Amena and I have both been through this training. The first step is we give you this overview of the assessment tool and how it's different, etc., because that's the rules, and I'm actually a rule follower. So the thing that we are going to be doing is called the Intercultural Development Inventory. And my methodology, right, of all of the work that I do is to do the best you can with what you've got some of the time, because that is better than doing nothing never. And that is generally considered a pretty low bar. And as much as I generally hate assessment tools, what I really like about the IDI is that no matter where we score at any point in time, which can evolve and change based on circumstances that we're living in the exact moment, it's all positive and it's all growth based. So that's what I like about it. The working assumptions of the assessment, I'm probably going to nerd out a little bit here, so just bear with me, is that it's value neutral. This is not a good, bad test. No one is going to lose. No one is going to win. I've actually given it to groups of people and someone said, "I won diversity." And as a white woman, in case anyone guessed that. So this is not a winning, losing situation. Number 2 is that I deeply believe we are 100% responsible for who and how we are in the world. So the more we can understand how we think we are in the world and how other people might perceive us, and then what's the difference between how we are perceived and how we are actually showing up. The IDI measures both of those things and then works towards closing that gap so that we can be responsible for ourselves. And even if we're awesome, which who isn't awesome, we can always do better. That's basically my working assumptions. You may be familiar with other kind of measurements or assessments or something, and I find the IDI to be the most successful in being able to measure what you think you are and then how people likely interact with you and what the gap between those two things is, because we should all be striving for there to be no gap, right? Is that who I want to be in the world is who people intercept, but that's not always the case. So, I went ahead of my slides. When we start talking about like what is visible and what is not visible, which came up in a lot of some of the conversations we had on Tuesday, we like to think that it's somehow kind of proportional, because I think that's just how our brains work when deflating everything into a binary. But the reality is that it's off kilter and it's weird of what we can see and what we can't see. So some of you may be familiar with the kind of overused glacier analogy, is that what is objective is what we can see above the surface. What is subjective is below the surface. Above the surface might be when we're talking specifically about culture and cultural difference. Some of the easy things that are visible are like food and language and art and music and games and taking up space or something we can experience. But when we start talking about differences, there's a lot more things that lead to differences than what is visible, right? And so there's roles, perceptions, beliefs, social expectations, behaviors, values, the stories that we write about one another in present tense, the stories that we have written about people that we just live by as if they are truth, but we wrote those stories. Those things kind of show up when we start talking about working across difference. Um, when Amena and I were talking about what do we want to talk about with this presentation, what I think is important in talking about differences and identities, and this is her slide because she's got better graphics than I do. All of the different roles and identities, ways we express ourselves, and ways we validate or perceive other people is really what we're talking about when this tool is going to measure who you want to be around difference and how people intercept you or react with you around difference. So everything is on the table. This is not just a race, gender, age, class conversation, but really each entity has their own culture and the culture that we're bringing with us. How does that gap show up between who we want to be and how people are interacting with us? And the idea is that we can do better, right? Like that's just the basic phenomenon. I drew an arrow on a flip chart. I don't know that any of you are going to remember that, but I did. And we talked about the different kind of stages that the assessment tool comes up with. We talked about denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. And then like super advanced is that every difference is completely integrated into yourself and your way of being and interacting with other people. Again, Amina with her better graphics, the way that she talks about or the way that the IDI, not Amina, which you can talk in just a second, the way that the assessment tool shows up, and I had mentioned that like most people like a good bell curve, right? Are really de-emphasize difference. And then as you kind of fall off of most folks, we're looking at judging difference versus comprehending difference, completely not even acknowledging or noticing, passively not even noticing, actively not engaging, or bridging difference. So when we talk about how the assessment is going to measure who you want to be and how other people interact with you across difference, likely you're going to follow human patterns, which is really disappointing because humans are really complicated and most humans behave in a human way. So this bell curve is likely to occur in the millions of people who've taken this assessment, which when we get through the week of y'all all taking the assessment, which again takes like 15 or 20 minutes or so, we'll do a group review where we can look at the bell curve specific to nowadays and how people show up here without knowing specifically how anybody individually scores. So Jada, kind of going back to your question, everybody's scores are completely confidential and are not shared with anybody unless you choose to share them. And you don't even get to know them until after we do the group review, because you'll find out your individual scores in a one-on-one with Amina to actually work through what it means and how it shows up as your own personal development. So it's not being held accountable to like job performance or anything like that. It's just you as a human. So that's kind of my quickie overview back to where we were on the Tuesday training. Amina, do you want to throw out anything or say anything about where we're at now?
Yeah, I can add like 2 items, and then I'm curious to see if anybody has been thinking about this and has any questions or anything. The size of the hexagons, sorry, the size of the hexagons actually resembles in 2019 is like the latest data that I had access to. As of 2019, anyone who had taken the IDI in the US and Canada is my understanding, the size of the hexagon shows you the percentage of people who landed in a particular orientation. So these are like the 5 developmental orientations on IDI's continuum. And so you can see the bulk of the North American population lives in minimization. So without doing any sustained, intentional, personal work to develop intercultural skills, our society, so this is the second point I want to make, is like our society here in the West, automatically by default predominantly socializes us into a minimization orientation. Okay, so we are, through nonverbal and verbal cues, taught to de-emphasize difference as a way to get along with other people, as a way to avoid conflict, as a way to not have to deal with differences that make us uncomfortable. And so the point basically I just want to make is that like this is a developmental, unlike those other assessment tools that Jess had on a previous slide, IDI is not a leadership personality tool. So it's not telling you who you are, how to own that, and then how to relate to others. It's actually showing you this is a developmental thing. So when you're born, everybody goes through these stages. So it's not like you magically land on minimization the minute you're born, right? Throughout your life, you develop across this continuum. And based on your lived experiences, you're going to stop predominantly at one of these stages, right? And the point of the assessment is to show you where you scored and where you aspire to be, because it's going to actually tell you what your self-perception is, and then what kind of a development plan you can use to bridge that gap and to progress towards the right end of the spectrum. So I just want to say is like, one, your score is going to be showing you where you are now. It's not a static result. It's not like if I measured, let's say if I measured in acceptance, it doesn't mean 100% of my life for every context with every human being, I'm always showing up from a place of acceptance orientation. It means that's my dominant skill set. But there are going to be topics, there are going to be individuals like my parents or my kid, where I will revert to like polarization, or I'll have like these older skill sets that I'm going to lean on to figure out how to engage with differences and commonalities that are showing up in our relationship. I think those are the 2 points I wanted to make, and I'm just curious if anybody had questions.
So this is Amena. The session that we've got scheduled for next Tuesday, would we be reviewing essentially the slide that's up right now as it relates to this particular team?
Correct. So everybody does the assessment individually, and the system averages those out to give you a group average to say, where do you as a collective, where do your skill sets and your orientation, where do you land as a collective? So you'll get to see a group score. And then in your individual debrief, you'll get to see your individual score.
Yeah, and I would add too, just in case people are curious about group reviews, is that I have done groups or board of directors, etc., where there is a fairly even distribution that looks almost exactly like this slide amongst that group. And I've done more work with groups that really tilted towards one side. And I think that some of that is that we recruit people like us. So there might be everyone on the board is in the top 3, or like in this case, the left side, or they are all on the right side. And there's not a value judgment placed there. It's just an acknowledgement of kind of a type that gets kind of into that particular group. And sometimes we have to more intentionally look at a space that would have people from across the different spectrum because all the skill sets might be needed at different times. Again, the thing I like about the IDI is there's no value judgment. It's value neutral. There's not a, you don't win or lose or the good way to show up or the bad way to show up. It's just acknowledging what skills you are currently showing up when you take the assessment in the next week. And from that place, what could you do to build skills? We all could use that, right? So this also parlays into our personal lives, but it also parlays into work and our leadership style, our management experience, our ability to work with coworkers. So it's all kind of connected.
And intercultural, like they, IDI defines the thing that they're testing as intercultural competence. And the way that I have heard it defined that I like is that intercultural competence basically is the degree to which you, like how much complexity can you bring to differences and commonalities in your life. You can imagine that if you bring a very little complexity to differences in your life, you're going to be a very polarized person possibly, or like not able to be open to difference and needing a large amount of commonalities for you to be feeling comfortable, right? And so that's what intercultural competence really is. And when we say difference, we're talking about like all sorts of difference. Like that's why I like to have like that slide with like a whole bunch of hexagons is showing you like differences are, yes, predominantly show up in our social systems, which are very hierarchical and have power differences in them. But differences can also exist in like our leanings towards sports teams and etc. So like, so differences are across the board, not just social systems and beyond race, class, gender, sexual orientation, those kind of systems. Thanks for asking. That's a good question, Eamon. Anyone else?
This is a question about the timeline. So we take the individual assessment, and then do we need to meet for the individual debrief before we do the group meeting, or does that come after?
After. So the timeline is you do the assessment, you get to see your group score so that, you know, you have some sort of a context for where you might end up, right? Like, so you can see your group score first, and we'll go a little bit more into details about the tool, give you some more information about the tool and do some group processing, and then you'll have your individual debriefs where you'll get to see your individual results.
And the individual assessment takes like 15 to 20 minutes. Is that the time commitment?
To actually do the assessment, yeah, 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. So I guess it's just, we should just have a check that everybody's comfortable. We would, because the group review is scheduled for next Tuesday, we will all need to do the 15, 20-minute exercise by then in order to go forward. That group review. Are we okay with that? Can we make that time? So Josh couldn't make it because his jet lag was killing him. So I'll send him this recording. I'll check in with him, make sure he can do it as well, because we'll need everybody to do it before we jump on the call. Seems like it's doable.
And that's a Zoom call Tuesday.
Zoom call on Tuesday, half-hour Zoom call, so we don't have to come in here with stop on.
Yeah. If we're clarifying what we're doing, the idea is, I also know there's a couple people who have vacations coming up, so we wanted to be really sensitive to that. So as soon as everyone in the context takes the assessment tool, we can do the group review, which is what we're talking about on Tuesday. And then Amena has gotten a ton of time blocked, and we'll show you how to do this. And then you'll just pick which time works for your life and your schedule to work with her for about an hour to go through your individual scores. And those blocks of time, I think the last one goes through July 3rd. So there's plenty of time, multiple hours, multiple days for people to be able to sign it. And it's all in a Google Sheet. So conveniently, as if I'm magic, all of you have received an email prior to the meeting of this starting with the specific link to the Google Sheet, as well as your individual unique codes to take the assessment and the directions of how to do that. But we wanted to go through, and we have to go through kind of how the background of the tool itself goes. I'm don't look at the screen. Okay, so this is what you'll end up looking like. So in that email, you'll have a username, a password. You'll go to the IDI assessment page itself. Takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. And then to work through your individual results or your development plan, you'll pick a time with Amena on that Google Sheet. And then she'll send you a Zoom link. You'll meet with her directly. And then anything that happens in that conversation, we just want to really emphasize this is confidential between you and Amena. You are also welcome to schedule listening sessions with me. I know that the burnout, exhaustion, the talk of doing emotional labor needs some support. So if I can support you in that way, you're welcome to schedule a one-on-one with me. But that's just me listening to whatever it is that you need me to listen to. Together, Amina and I will be looking for patterns. So we will be having conversations about patterns, but not anybody specifically. The individual scores are accessible to Amina and I because of us being qualified administrators and working on this project, but I'm not privy to any of the information that you have with Amina or the professional development plan that y'all might discuss or talk about. So thoughts or comments about that? Again, the idea is just to make sure you have plenty of resources. Jada.
You said that the debrief would be about an hour. I'm just curious what that hour would consist of and what this professional development plan looks like, if it's something that we're all required to do, and yeah.
Amina, do you want to take what one
Yeah, so the
look like?
debrief takes 60 minutes. I give you your results, so it's a report. So we walk through your report so that you know how to read it and interpret it. And then there's some processing and reflection that takes place while we review your report. That takes about 40 minutes is my experience with people. And then IDI also provides you with a development plan for you based on where you landed on the continuum. And so I actually go over your development plan with you as well. And we talk about like things that are relevant as they show up. So most people, when they're looking at the results, there's some processing that happens and people will mention this scenario happened. So does it mean X, Y, Z? And so there's some like, it's a mix of me reviewing your results, part coaching, part strategizing for a development plan that you can do on your own.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't planned anything beyond just this assessment exercise, right? Like we can talk about what the options are. We can talk with Jess about maybe another person we can work with on a training plan. But I think right now, as a group, this is the only thing we've committed to is like the individual assessment, the group review on Tuesday, and then an individual session with Amena. And then everybody can just sit with that information, and then we can take a moment, take a breath, and talk about it as a group.
I tell people like intercultural competency is like learning a new language. Like the metaphor that works really well is if I was learning, so if you're learning a new language, let's say that doesn't have the English alphabet, so I don't know what kind of group we have, so what language to use, but like if you were using a language where the characters are different as well, right? There are different levels of being able to learn how to use that language. If you never have an immersion experience, it's never going to occur to you how different your competency in speaking the language would be if you don't have an immersion experience, right? And so if you want to master a language without immersion, which I think what ends up being, what intercultural competence ends up being experientially in the US, it's like, how do we build those skills where we're not necessarily having immersion experiences because of just how our geography is designed and how redlining happens and all of that. And so how do you build a development plan so you can move above wherever you score on the spectrum? And clients have like 100% of the time will increase in their competency by 2 stages once they do the IDI, because it's a soft skill, and most often we don't have a way to test this soft skill, right? I'm never going to overestimate my ability to fly an airplane. right? I will never overestimate that, or to put on a pair of skates and hop onto an ice rink. If I don't know how to do it, I'm like, I don't know how to do it. I'm not going to try. I'm going to get hurt. But when it comes to things like intercultural competency skills, right, or like parenting skills, I don't necessarily know how to improve them often because there isn't a really good way to have an objective measure of what my current skills are and how to map the growth. And so that's what like the IDI assessment does, and why the individual debrief is so important, because it's customized to individuals. Everybody comes to life from a very unique set of lived experiences.
The only thing I would add is that in the work that I've done with one-on-ones, those soft skills are also around supervision, having challenging conversations, taking on leadership roles, managing, union organizing, being able to create and foster a community. Those are also really soft skills. And so then this is a quantifiable way of kind of starting in a place. And then how do you build or grow skills from there, depending on which context you're talking about. So that's why I suggested it as an option for nowadays. So I know y'all have other things to talk about in your staff meeting, but we want to make sure that if there are questions or comments, you have a chance to do that. How are we feeling about this? Thoughts about this?
Good.
3 thumbs up. That's amazing.
4. I assumed the other person had both hands up.
The probably the worst bit of directions to tell an anxious overthinker triple Virgo is to not overthink something. So this is me doing that. When you access the assessment, which again, all your directions and your codes are already in your email box. I know that y'all don't always love emails, but that's the best way. I don't have texting or any way of getting in touch with most of you. So it is already in your inbox. So please, 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 please check your email. But when you are doing the assessment, I encourage you to think that you are having a conversation with the assessment tool. You are not trying to win it. You are not trying to lose it. And try not to overthink it, which again is a terrible thing to tell an overthinker. And then as you're going through any kind of ongoing support that Amena or I can provide for you, we're available. So she's taking on the one-on-one conversations. If you want to have a listening session with me, you want to reach out, you want to talk, Jada and I were talking about movies and articles and stuff. I'm here in a way to support you in whatever way you are willing to want to be supported, if that makes any sense. So stay in touch. I'm happy to help. And I think that this will be a really cool thing for each person individually to be able to figure out where is that path forward that everyone is looking for. Everyone has a path forward. So then how do you figure out where you're starting so that everyone can move forward? And you can get better, right? So that's kind of the plan. Anyway, that's all I got. Thoughts? Amena, do you want a last word?
No, I mean, I would just say is like the instructions for the groups are check your email, do the assessment, book your one-on-one, which is just putting your name in a time slot on the spreadsheet, and I will send you a Google invite with a Zoom link. If you can accept it, that gives me an indication you've seen it and makes me feel like, okay, great. The person has seen the invite, and then you are set. The IDI assessment is just simply 50 prompts with, and on a Likert scale of agree to disagree is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be reading a statement, and IDI is just asking you, to what degree do you agree or disagree with a statement? That is it. It's a fairly easy assessment and pretty quick to do.
Cool. And I'm just showing you briefly the Google Sheet that you have the link to in your email. The first tab is, to my knowledge, everyone's name, title, and email. And then I'll check off if you've taken the IDI, largely so Amena and I can asynchronously communicate. The second page is your secret codes. So when you lose the email or forget or something, it's right here. Those codes can only be used once, and you will not have access to the answer. So if you accidentally use somebody else's code, which seems weird and is probably related to a pasting error on my part more than your error, just let me know and we'll go from there. And then the next one is kind of the steps that are being planned out as possibles. And then you'll see all of these spaces are all the time slots that Amina's holding on her schedule. So frankly, the earlier you pick a slot, the more she gets to like unblock her time, even if it goes all the way out to July 3rd. And that's it. That's the Google Sheet. So it should be fairly easy to do asynchronously. 15-20 minutes, take the assessment. We'll see you back on Tuesday. And then please schedule an appointment with Amena as soon as you can that works with your schedule for the one-on-one so she can release the rest of her available time and like play with her family and do other work. So
Make sourdough.
make sourdough. Yeah, she is an incredible baker if any of you are interested. I did not succeed in that genre. Anyway, that's our presentation. Thoughts, comments, anything?
No, thanks, Jess.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really, thank Amina. She doesn't know what she said yes to yet.
No, I do. I love this. I love doing this work, so I'm kind of a
Awesome.
good fit.
Okay.
Yes, Josh
Question?
couldn't attend because jet lag got the best of him in Taiwan. Are you able to send the recording to me